Swiftonomics.
Taylor, you guys right here! Taylor, what's up?
The most feel-good story to come out of the dismal science in a long time. The theory that Taylor Swift's Eras Tour is boosting economies around the world. But is it even real? I'm not going to give the game away immediately. I do want you guys to listen to the whole pod. But I will say to all the Swifties listening, let's not have any bad blood about what the data shows. Because that's what we do here on Reuters Econ World. Every week, we pick a phrase or buzzword and go deep on the economic principles and ideas driving the biggest news around the world. And this week, as the Eras Tour wraps up its London leg, we look at Swiftonomics in Europe. I'm your host, Carmel Crimmins in Dublin. Okay, so I've been on vacation these past few weeks, and that's meant I've spent a lot of time listening to Taylor Swift in a rental car. Family vacation. The 12-year-old is a big Swiftie. I'm a bit of a fan myself, but even if I hadn't been listening to non-stop Tay-Tay, I'm well aware, as I'm sure you are too, of the global phenomenon that is the Eras Tour. The billion-dollar concert is the biggest tour of all time. Legions of fans have bought up concert seats, hotel rooms, and sequined cowboy boots all over the place. A foiled terror attack in Vienna hasn't deterred some of them from seeing their hero.
So we traveled from the States to go to the Vienna shows, and our shows were canceled. Obviously, all of them were. And so we came to London, hoping to still make it happen.
But what about the concert's economic impact? The Eras Tour has been credited with boosting local economies across the US and overseas. It's even got its own name, Swiftonomics. My colleague, Balazs Koranyi, has been evaluating the concept of Swiftonomics in Europe. He's our chief ECB correspondent based in Frankfurt. Balazs, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Balazs, I associate you with scoops on the European Central Bank and, deep dives into monetary policy. This interest in Taylor Swift is intriguing. Are you a Swiftie?
Well, it's intriguing to me as well. I'm not quite a Swiftie. I think I'm a different generation. I don't even understand her music all that well, but I love macroeconomics. I love numbers. So anything about economics and economic impact, it tends to interest me.
So Balazs, we've had economic impacts being ascribed to musicians before. Beyoncé's tour causing an inflationary bump in Sweden, right? But Taylor Swift is on a whole different level. The launch of her tour kind of created its own ecosystem. A lot of cities and countries seem to be saying, this is great economic news for us, right?
That's the argument. Taylor going on this concert tour, something on the magnitude of 50 concerts all across the continent. She's in Dublin, she's in London, she's in Portugal, going all over, lots and lots of American tourists coming over to Europe because it's significantly cheaper. And a lot of people actually make the argument that getting on a plane, flying to Europe, going to a Taylor Swift concert, and spending a couple of nights in a hotel, going out to eat in a restaurant, if you add it all up, it's still cheaper than buying a concert ticket somewhere in the US. So the argument goes that all these people coming over by the tens of thousands are just generating this huge economic boost for the continent.
And not just for Europe, right? I mean, we've also had US cities as well talk her up, right? We had the Philadelphia Fed mention her in the Beige Book, talking about the impact on tourism, hotels, and Singapore, right? So it's kind of like this global phenomenon. So you've had to dig in. What did your European data analysis tell you?
So I had to dig in, and basically I came to the conclusion that Swiftonomics is as good as it sounds. It's really not real. You have a temporary marginal impact in certain communities, certain industries, but when it comes to the broader picture, it really doesn't make a difference.
So what is happening? People are spending a lot of money, right?
Yeah. So let's take a case study, because I think case studies tend to illustrate points a lot better than just concepts that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about Sweden for a second. Beyoncé going to Sweden, having an impact on inflation. But Taylor Swift also came through Stockholm. And Stockholm is a perfect example because A, Beyonce had already been there.
Right.
B, because it's a relatively small economy. So if you're going to have an impact, it's easier to measure on a smaller economy. And C, Sweden is such a well organized Nordic country that they already have plenty of statistics for us to look at and measure the actual impact.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to go through the numbers in Sweden, and there were a couple of points. So, point number one, Americans flocking to Sweden are bringing in lots of new and fresh income.
Yeah.
I looked at booking numbers. That's actually true. If you look at arrivals from the United States, you had on the magnitude of 30%, I think a 31, 32% increase in foreign arrivals from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge jump. That's an absolutely massive jump. But others didn't come. Arrivals from Norway, from Denmark, from Great Britain dropped.
Right.
Domestic tourism dropped.
Okay.
And when you added up all the guest nights in hotels,
Mm-hmm.
you actually saw a drop, which is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It basically turns out that all the Swifties coming to Sweden basically crowded out other people who decided not to come, went elsewhere outside Sweden, or just stayed at home. And the overall impact on bookings was actually negative.
Huh.
So there was no boost for hotels in terms of rooms sold. So then the second thing I looked at, I said, right, so the American arrivals were offset by lower arrivals from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Then surely all these people on a fairly high budget are going to spend a lot more money.
Right. When you're out, as we say here in Ireland.
Yeah.
Go big or go home, right?
That's correct. And so I looked at spending, and it's true. Spending on hotels increased significantly.
Yeah.
There was an 8% jump in revenues in accommodations. And 8% is a significant jump. But look at a year ago. May is the start of the season. And last year, we had a 10% jump in May. So compared to a year ago, the bump that Sweden experienced in May was actually smaller.
Huh.
Still, 8% is 8%. It's a respectable number. So I said, let's look at what this means in actual nominal terms. What does this mean in dollars?
Can I stop you there? So does that mean that the Swifties were spending, but not spending as much perhaps as one might expect?
That's right.
Right. Okay. Is it because they've spent so much on their ticket and their air flight that when they get there, they're maybe a little tapped out?
Let me get to that a second because I think that's a very interesting issue. But let me go to the nominal numbers. So the 8% jump is still a respectable number, but in actual dollars, it means a $27 million increase in spending.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation was almost 4%. So essentially, the 8% jump, half of it is eaten up by inflation.
Right.
But still, forget inflation. In nominal terms, Swedish hotels experienced a $27 million jump in revenues.
Yeah.
Compare that to an economy which is worth something on the order of $625 billion. Is that really big? $27 million?
Drop in the ocean.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any kind of a difference for the Swedish economy.
Okay.
Then your question of course, do they spend in restaurants?
Yeah.
Do they spend on merchandise? Well, Sweden is one of those very few countries that produces monthly gross domestic product numbers.
Oh, brilliant.
So we actually saw what Swedish GDP looked like in May. And surprise, surprise, GDP fell.
Ah, what?
Fell by 0.2% compared to the previous May. And why did it fall? It fell because of household consumption. Consumption by ordinary people is declining. So there was no swift bump in Swedish consumption. In fact, consumption by the general public continues to contract in Sweden, and it's the broader economy, net trade, that is insulating Swedish growth.
Huh.
You looked at retail numbers, the same thing. You had a decline in spending on consumables. So there was probably a swift bump for Stockholm, for sellers of merchandise,
Yeah.
for some hotels and restaurants nearby.
Mm-hmm.
But when you add it all up, then the impact is essentially negligible. It's barely visible. It's close to zero.
Huh. What about, I thought there would have been a multiplier effect though. You come in, you've bought your ticket, one concert ticket begets a hotel room, begets a meal, but we're not seeing that multiplier effect then, is what you're saying.
Well, I would say two things about that. One is that a lot of this spending is what economists call substitution. As in, the money you're going to spend on a concert ticket, you're not going to spend it on a meal or on a vacation. You don't have more money. You just have a limited amount of resource, and you're going to decide where to spend that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're not having that sort of multiplier effect.
Huh. So I'm quite shocked actually, because I get the idea that there isn't like a long lasting effect, like Taylor Swift comes into town and then she leaves town. But I did think that when she was there, at least there would be a significant impact. I mean, the Singapore government actually granted her an award to get her to come and hold her concert there. They may not have got the return on the investment they were looking for.
I think it makes sense if you're a small country and you can attract mostly foreigners to come in for an event.
Okay.
And Singapore is geographically, it's over a small area.
Right.
Easily accessible, big airport, lots of people can come in. So I think it could make sense because you're generating traffic for your hotels.
Yeah.
You're generating revenue for the government in terms of taxes. And so it can make sense in certain cases, but keep in mind, this is a one-off.
Yeah.
It's a small one-off. You're generating revenue, much smaller income in taxes.
Right.
And then as soon as the event is over, it's gone. That brings me to another point, which is that a lot of the money that comes in also leaves. So it's not a one-way street because Taylor Swift is a business. And the money that she generates in Sweden or Singapore or Portugal, that's certainly not staying in the country. As soon as the concert's over, of course, Taylor Swift Inc. is going to repatriate that profit to the United States. And therefore, it's going to show up as a negative in the balance of payments. But to be fair, it's not a huge impact.
Right.
So how much could she make in Sweden? Let's say she makes 10 million in profit that she can repatriate after paying taxes and VAT and everything in Sweden. 10 million compares to a quarterly balance of payments surplus in Sweden of well over 40 billion. So we're talking about peanuts for an economy.
So is there a place which is reaping the economic benefits of music stardom? Beyond the buzz about Swiftonomics, is there another musician or group of musicians who should be getting a shout out? You know us on Reuters Econ World by now. We like to take a real world look at what we're talking about. And who better than our very own Tara Oakes, a familiar voice from Reuters World News, to do some digging for us. She's a committed Swiftie and a resident of Liverpool, a city still reaping the benefits of Beatlemania.
I'm here on Matthew Street, which is the home of Beatles tourism in Liverpool.
That's Brian Epstein.
The city of Liverpool has said that over £80 million a year is generated by just Beatles tourism. And that's really centred around Matthew Street.
We also manage their entry to America.
It's not yet midday on midweek. And there are already dozens of people here from all over the world. Come to look at everything from the Hey Jude barber shop to posing with pictures of a statue of John Lennon, or heading to exactly where I'm going, the Cavern. I'm going to meet Managing Director of Cavern Club Tours, Bill Heckle. Hey Bill, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
And you are Mr. Beatles Tourism, basically. The city gave you a Citizen of Honour award back in 2020, right? And tell us about some of the projects you've been involved in here.
You know, we've had the Cavern for over 30 years. And what we've done is taken something that was in its grassroots era of tourism. Really, the thing that set it all off when you look back was, unfortunately, John Lennon's murder. There was no place for anybody to go and pay tribute. Same thing, unfortunately, happened when George died as well. And so by default, Liverpool itself has become that place to go and pay tribute and to experience the Beatles in their own city. And that's what's happened. And it's been exponential growth right through that period.
And you'd be forgiven for thinking that every week in Liverpool is Beatle Week, but this is actually International Beatle Week starting this week. Can you tell us a bit about what that entails?
Yeah, it started as a Beatle weekend in the 1970s, and we took it over in 1986. And literally, we do 500 gigs at least in a week. People from all around the world absolutely love it. And the hotels are full. The economic impact is crazy. But what's really great these days, we used to have Beatle Week, this huge spike in the year, and then it go down again and we get back to normal after the week. Now it's pretty much right the way through the year because we get people all the time.
Why do you think it's grown so much, though? Why are more and more people coming?
People are getting more and more interested because the Beatles have become more and more entrenched in our history. I remember once in 1984 on Granada TV, being interviewed. It was about Liverpool and its future. And I said one day the Beatles in Liverpool will be as synonymous as Shakespeare in Stratford. And in fact, one day it'll actually beat Shakespeare for interest in tourism. And I was told to grow up, get a real job, and that's not sustainable for our city. And they're not proper jobs. Well, how wrong was the leader of the council then? Because they are proper jobs and have been sustainable and will be sustainable.
How was the Taylor Swift time for you? Was it an economic bump or more of a dip if people were coming and taking up all the hotel rooms who weren't necessarily here as Beatles tourists?
There was an element of that the normal people that would come as tourists, a lot of them weren't there because A, they couldn't get the hotels, and B, if they could get a hotel, the supply and demand, the price of it was just astronomical. But we didn't actually, as a business, suffer in any way, shape or form because you had the Taylor Swift fans here. And it's the only other thing I've ever seen that can compare with Beatlemania, really. There's just craziness of the Swiftie fans. It's nothing I've seen in that period, 40-odd years, another band that has that sort of mania about it. But yeah, let's see if it's here in another 40 years.
So Balazs, your reporting suggests that Swiftonomics doesn't exist for Europe. What have Swifties made of your conclusion?
Well, it hasn't been positive, I will admit. Some people have come after me. I got a little bit of hate mail. Not too much, unfortunately. I was hoping for a bit more.
You don't mind being a hater?
No, well, that's exactly what I was accused of, that I'm a hater. I only write negative stuff.
I'm sorry.
And I drag people down, and why not just enjoy the moment and why not be positive about it?
Oh.
But so A, as a central banking correspondent, I don't get mail at all, especially not hate mail. So it's really nice to get feedback.
Hey. Yeah.
But I'm also into numbers.
Yeah.
You know, I think numbers tell the story and numbers don't lie.
So what economic benefit could we link to Taylor Swift in Europe? Does she maybe lift consumer sentiment, or does it all get shaken off?
I think if she makes a difference, then this is exactly where she makes a difference. As in, a lot of the economy depends on sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
And when people feel good about themselves, about their lives, they're happy,
yeah,
they become more confident and they spend more easily. And confidence has this snowballing effect. Confident economies produce more growth. And once you have more growth, companies start to become more confident and start to spend on investments as well.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, this is small scale, right? So, and this is all anecdotal. Taylor Swift is not going to turn the European economy around.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, in the summertime, when people feel better about themselves, they spend more freely.
Yeah.
That generates a bit more income on the tax revenue side. And if that's persistent enough, then it's going to impact corporate sentiment as well. And once corporate sentiment starts to improve, then companies start to spend more on their investments. And that's the crucial part that is missing in the European economy right now. Investment is very, very low. Credit growth is at zero. Companies don't want to spend. So that's really where the European economy needs a lot of help.
So if Tay-Tay's given us all a buzz after her European leg of her tour, maybe we might see it in the coming quarters. And we'll get you back on, Balazs, to discuss.
Fingers crossed.
That's it for this week. I hope this episode wasn't too upsetting for all the Taylor Swift fans out there. A big thank you to Balazs Koranyi, Tara Oakes, and everyone who covers economics at Reuters. Sound design and music composition on this show was by Josh Summer. Vila de Kretzer is our executive producer. Our podcast team includes Kim Vinnell, Tara Oakes, Gail Issa, Sharon Wright-Garson, David Spencer, Jonah Green, and Chris Woljasper. Remember, for all your daily news, check out our weekday show, Reuters World News. You can catch it on the Reuters app or wherever you listen to your podcasts.